So what does that actually mean to do experience design? Well, it turns out experience design has a lot of moving parts. First, we have to take whatever we're designing and make sure that all the information that's in it and all the functionality that's in it is stored in a way that people can find it. We call that information architecture. Next, we have to make sure all the words that appear on the screen actually communicate the messages we want them to communicate in an effective, meaningful way. There's a name for that. It's called copyright. If we're going to do these incremental improvements, we have to have a process that lets us do that, which means we have to understand how we're going to actually iterate and learn from each iteration, and then integrate that back into the design and do that again. That's design process management, which is very related to the mechanism that actually tells us how each of those iterations work, which is user research, which lets us up front figure out who the users are, what we're trying to do, and then while we're designing, actually integrate that process together. And from there, we start to piece together the flows and the movement and the transitions, and that becomes the interaction design with the input and the output of the system that says, okay, this is everything that's going on. Now, a lot of the systems we build have large amounts of information, so we have to figure out how to visually represent that information in a way that people can understand what's going on and see glean the insights from the important things while not being bogged down with all the noise from the unimportant things, and that's information design. And that shouldn't be confused with visual design, which a lot of people think is all about aesthetic, but it's not about aesthetic. It is, in fact, all about prioritization of communication. It's about making sure that the most important stuff jumps off the screen when the user needs it, and the less important stuff whispers its message at that moment that the user needs to know about it. And finally, we have to understand that the process of design is as much about saying no as it is about saying yes. That what makes great design are all the things we leave out of the design. In the feature world, we included everything. But in the experience world, we say no to a lot of things. And that's what the role of editing and curation is all about. So these are the skills that a team needs in order to be able to produce great designs. But over the last 8 or so years, we've been researching what it takes to do these great designs, and what we've learned is it doesn't stop here. That the most successful teams have more than just this. For example, they know how to go out into the field and actually meet with their customers and users and glean important insights about their context and what's going on. They understand a tremendous amount about the domain that they work in. If they're in medicine, if they produce products in healthcare, they understand healthcare. If they produce products in finance, they understand finance. So they have to have all these skills in those particular domains. At the same time, they have to understand how the business that they're in makes money to be able to support the products and services that they're producing. And they also need to deal with the fact that all these tools now produce a ton of information. All of this data is coming in from their customers all the time, and they have to move them, take that data and glean useful insights from it. So they have all these analytics to deal with. And at the same time, they have to be able to communicate to the users and the customers the value of the things that they're building and implementing, so they have to understand how to market what they're doing. Of course, the technology underneath is constantly changing, and so they have to keep up on what is possible and what is not possible based on what the implementation platforms are. And all of this means that they have to be able to turn to the stakeholders and say, look, this is going to cost you some money, but here's what you're going to get from it. So they have to understand how to talk about the ROI of all of this. On top of which, there's this huge fact that over the last 20 years we've seen a dramatic shift where we're no longer designing an interface for a person talking to a computer. Almost every interface now is about people talking to other people, with the computers just as moderators. So everything is now social. So everything we have to deal with is about social. And At the same time, we have to figure out how to take all this and translate it into a language that the people who are going to implement it actually know. So we have to know what we can give them to make sure they implement the intent that we're building into our design, which means we have to know something about the methods they use to develop their process so we can fit within their schedule, within their budgets, and understand what they need when. And so now this is what you need in order to put together a great design. Thank you. Unfortunately, it doesn't even stop here. We have spent the last several years and most of this past year talking to hiring managers, asking them the question, if you think about the best designers you've ever had, what separates them from all the other designers? And what's come back are not any of these skills. What's come back are things like they know how to take what we're building and create a story that gets everybody involved in the process. They can explain that story to users, they can explain that story to other coworkers, they can explain that story to managers, and so they know how to tell a great story. What we heard from the hiring managers was these people know how to take criticism. They know how to give criticism. They know how to bring people in the room into a constructive and affirmative criticism process that actually moves the design forward. What we heard from the hiring managers is that they can take an idea in their head and very quickly, whether on a napkin or on a whiteboard or on a sheet of paper or on a computer screen, get that idea out so that people can give them feedback and criticism on it immediately at the level of detail that they have given it thought and not worry about things being rendered differently. So sketching an idea has been absolutely critical. What the hiring managers told us was that being able to stand in front of your peers, stand in front of your stakeholders, stand in front of your users, and actually communicate your ideas in a cogent, interesting way, being able to present, is one of the top skills they need right now. And what the hiring managers tell us is that they need to be able to take a room of stakeholders or take a room of users and use those people's time effectively, facilitating a workshop that will actually draw requirements that nobody in the room knows to say if asked, what are your requirements? But instead can actually bring out those ideas, sometimes by having people draw things and then say why it won't work. That these soft skills are just as important as the hard skills. And that in order to put together an experienced design team, you need all of these skills, not just some, if you're going to produce great industry-changing design. And the interesting thing is, in the 10 years that we've been studying this, the size of design teams has actually been getting smaller. There are some teams that are getting larger, but the vast majority are getting smaller and smaller. And it's not unusual to find 3 people, 2 people, 1 person design teams. The team of 1 way outnumbers the team of 20 in organizations now. So how do you do all this with a team of 1?